All right, we are live. Hello, hello, hello. Let me just get us set up on Facebook as well. And happy Friday. In today's live training, we're going to be talking all about fight or flight and how it affects you in your body. So let me just give me 1 second, because last time when we were up in the Facebook group, I could not see any of the comments. So I have a separate tab open. Hopefully I can see them straight in the group versus the live. All right. So if you guys are not familiar with fight or flight, basically, so it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So there's 4 different responses that our body can have. And what it is anytime we go through a challenge, a trauma, an upset, a stressor, our body can go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Now, why is this so important to know? Well, for a lot of us, our body gets stuck in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And then these become our survival methods of we just start operating out of these day to day, versus if you're in a traumatic situation and you need to get into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn just to get through it, that's fine. But the body needs to go back and not stay there. And what happens is the body gets stuck in it. So we're going to talk all about how that works. For me, once I understood this, it just, I don't know, maybe I'm just a science nerd. And once I kind of understood what things go with the body, it was easier to go, so it just, I have to turn this on and I have to turn this off. And it just made it a lot easier to understand what was going on in my body versus maybe shaming or judging myself for having these reactions, or feeling bad that I was, getting argumentative or running from problems or whatever was going on. So once I realized it was just my body's way of dealing with stuff, I was like, oh, okay, well then I can then regulate the body to get out of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And just really quick, we'll go over what kind of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn is. So if you go through a traumatic situation, your body is going to respond in one of those 4 ways. Fight basically is you want to get argumentative, you want to fight. It doesn't have to be physically, it can be verbally, argumentative, yelling. But there's a reactive mind that gets kicked in and it goes on overdrive. And so there's some type of oh, you said what? So that fight energy is that. Flight is simply just that. You want to run away from problems. You run away from situations, relationships. You're always just avoiding conflict. Fawn basically means that you will do anything to make the other person happy, even at your own cost. So you're just okay, whatever you need. And then freeze is where you're just either mentally or physically shut down, where the body or the brain just is I'm frozen. I don't know why I couldn't run. I don't know why I couldn't go get help. And I just was stuck in a state of freeze, right? So those are basically the 4 methods. And we're going to go over what happens with the body when it's in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So the first thing I want to talk about is just a part of the brain that we have, and it's called the amygdala. And this is our brain that regulates emotion and memory. Our amygdala also is our response to the fear. So this is the part of the brain that's in charge of the fight or flight. Okay. So what it will do is it will send signals to your brain and it activates your autonomic nervous system. Now, this is a really key part in the fight or flight, your autonomic nervous system. It's also called ANS. So if you hear me reference ANS, we're talking about the autonomic nervous system, okay? And why we need to know about the ANS is because it has 2 main parts that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. These are basically the parts that are going to put you in fight or flight and take you out. So this is important to know how these parts of the body work, okay? So your sympathetic nervous system is going to speed up the body, and then the parasympathetic nervous system is going to slow it down. So the sympathetic nervous system is the one that's going to put you in fight or flight, and the parasympathetic nervous system is the one that will take you out of it, okay? So that sympathetic nervous system, it will respond to the threat, whatever's going on, whatever challenge, whatever stress, whatever trauma, whatever it perceives as a threat. It's going to perceive something is wrong and there's a threat going on, and your parasympathetic nervous system will respond to the threat by releasing hormones. Okay. What it will do is your adrenal glands get triggered and they release adrenaline and noradrenaline. And I'm going to go into those a little bit deeper in just a second. Okay. Also to highlight, your adrenal glands in this process will make these hormones and they release them into your blood system because they want that quicker response. They want it to be like, okay, right now, let's turn this on. This is happening in this moment. So a quick way to make that activated is through the blood. Okay. And then as soon as it's in your blood system, your body goes into fight or flight. So what will happen is you will stay in the sympathetic nervous system until your body perceives that threat to be over. And you will go into parasympathetic. Your parasympathetic nervous system gets activated, okay? And your heart rate, your breathing decrease, your body starts to return back to its normal, digestion resets, the nervous system and all their functions start to go back to normal. So the parasympathetic nervous system is the key to regulating your body with fight or flight, okay? And I know I just said a lot of terms and a lot of words, and basically all we need to know is that the sympathetic nervous system puts you in and the parasympathetic nervous system takes you out, okay? Like I said, for me, once I started understanding this, it was like, oh, okay, this is just a body, it's operating, and I can start to understand what's going on. So let's look at this at a deeper level. So I started using some words. Maybe you've heard of something like adrenaline. When adrenaline is produced in the body, it will increase your heart rate, expand air passageways to the lungs. It increases blood pressure, enlarges the pupils, improves vision, hearing, other senses, decreases pain sensitivity. It will slow down your digestion. Blood vessels will send more blood to the brain and muscles and makes your brain more alert, raises blood sugar, and gives you more energy. Now, why is that any of that important? Okay, so I want to talk about that. We're going to kind of pick that apart here for a second. So just for an example, and it doesn't always have to be this traumatic, but just anytime your body perceives a threat, it's going to go into fight or flight. For me, I went through a kidnapping and sexual assault. My body obviously went into fight or flight. So when I talk about things such as improving vision, hearing, and other senses, it was important for me at that time to see things a normal person may not see. How can I escape the situation? Like, it's almost like it slows things down. So I know I have this like millisecond to grab that door and run. So all those other senses were so important to be activated to get myself out of it. So when we're talking about increased heart rate, that's happening. So you can go, hello, this is not okay, right? We're getting more air to the lungs. So, we're able to do more. Okay. We're not getting short of breath. And then if you have to run longer distance, if you're trying to get away from somebody, okay. So all of this enhancing is good because not only does it wake up the body and say something is wrong, but it's going to help you find your safety. Another thing I said in there is decreasing pain sensitivity, right? So I was with violent attackers, and imagine just getting punched over and over and over. I mean, that's a painful experience. So it's important for the body to decrease that pain. I also said slows digestion. Why is that important? Because if my body's operating on processing food and, working on the digestive tract, it's not able to fully focus on the other areas. It's going to slow down parts of your body that aren't important at that time to put all the focus on getting the help you need to get out of that situation. All of this is happening to benefit you. The sympathetic nervous system is trying to wake you up to get you safety, right? So even other things I said, like we're getting more blood to the brain and muscles to wake you up, alert and awake. Like I said, alertness, and it gives you more energy so you can, in a situation like I was in, find a way to get safety. So with the adrenaline, it's also called epinephrine, and that is a neurotransmitter and a hormone. Okay. And basically a neurotransmitter is just a chemical messenger that transmits nerve signals across nerve endings to nerve cells, muscle cells, and gland cells. It's just doing the work behind the scenes. Okay. It's also a hormone, and it's released by the adrenal glands, like we talked about earlier. The other one I talked about is noradrenaline. Maybe you've heard of the adrenaline, but not the noradrenaline. And so what that is, it helps you stay alert and focused. This is your attention, your cognitive functions, your stress reactions. Okay. So If you're in a situation, you need that hyper alert and awake energy. So you're going to pay attention to all those details. Your cognitive functions, they're going to be like turned up to a higher degree. Okay. But it's not only alertness, it also is arousal, your attention. This will constrict your blood vessels, which helps maintain the blood pressure. Noradrenaline also affects like your sleep-wake cycle, memory, mood. It's also called norepinephrine and is also a neurotransmitter and a hormone. Okay. So now that we've kind of seen like what goes on with the body and why this is important, that it's actually benefiting us. So when we are in these states of trauma and these perceived threats, we want that sympathetic nervous system to get activated because it's going to, like I said, help you find your way out of a challenging situation. But what happens as soon as it's over, right? Some of you may be in a state of shock. It may not be that severe depending on your situation. Your sympathetic nervous system will then turn off and the parasympathetic will turn on. But the issue is trauma gets stored in the body and in the cells. And so it's so easy to flip it back on once it's been on. And so we don't want to just be flipping back and forth between sympathetic and parasympathetic. Like you're having a fine day and then you're arguing with a coworker and then all of a sudden it's like, what did you say? Like, well, your sympathetic nervous system just puts you back in fight or flight. So until we deal, with these challenges and traumas and past experiences, our body's going to keep, that sympathetic nervous system is going to keep getting reawoken. It's just lying dormant. It's like, hey, I'm going to go take a nap, right? And you can operate as sympathetic throughout most of the day, but then what happens is that or you can operate out of parasympathetic most of the day, but that once that sympathetic gets activated, right, we're either running in flight, we're fighting in fight, we're avoiding all conflict and fawn, or we don't know what to do when we're immobilized in freeze. And so we really want to be able to get the nervous system back into the parasympathetic state. And so this can help release the trauma and help you regulate your body so you're not always operating out of fight or flight, okay? So just a little bit more information about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system is the parasympathetic nervous system is what it does is it puts your body into a state of relaxation, okay? If you've ever heard of it, maybe you've heard of it called rest and digest. That's what it's kind of known as, because again, the body's going to rest and it's going to focus on digest, but it will conserve the energy that can be used for later. So your parasympathetic nervous system is going to say, hey, okay, I've got all this extra energy. I don't need it, but let's store it because again, there will be a time something's going to pop up and maybe you need that extra energy, whether it's through a challenge or not. And that parasympathetic nervous system is just going to like leave that. It's like packed away in the back of the closet, or it's like a storage unit for you. So it holds that there for you. Lastly, the parasympathetic nervous system, it also relates like bodily functions, like I said, digestion and urination and stuff. So that's basically about the parasympathetic nervous system. It's a calm, chill, zen, relaxed state. This is a good place to be in. We don't always need to be high energy. We don't always need to be hyper and alert, which is fine, but we don't want that overactive energy with the sympathetic. It's like, because that's going to put us in a fight or flight. So the sympathetic, right? Other things to know about it is it dilates blood vessels, it increases your blood pressure, which I think we talked about, contracts the muscles. It's also in charge of releasing the sweat from the glands. And like I said, it responds to these dangerous situations by all the things we talked about, like speeding up the heart rate and getting you more blood and oxygen. And because all it wants to do is get your body out of danger. It's just a program that's running and it's saying, hey, this is danger and I need to get out of it. So it's constantly working on your behalf, that sympathetic nervous system, but it's just not a place to operate out of 24/7, because then we're in this more very dense energy of survival and we're not actually being able to process and deal with stuff. So it's really important to start working with that parasympathetic nervous system. I also want to tie this together with chakras, because for those that don't know, I am the chakra coach. And for me, how I relate the fight or flight is through the solar plexus. If you're not familiar with chakras, I mainly work with the main seven. And we have the root and the sacral and the solar plexus is about 2 inches above the belly button. It's governed by the color yellow. So I put on like a nice gold shirt today. And our solar plexus is a masculine chakra, and it relates with us stepping into our power and our third authority and our will and our expression. And so if we're not in this confident, high self-esteem energy because maybe of a trauma we've gone through, our solar plexus can actually be like damaged. And I'm saying that in air quote because it's not. It's probably just underactive, but it has a trauma link to it. And so when we're working, with the ANS and we're dealing with the fight or flight, it like weakens the solar plexus. And it's like the best way I could explain is how I perceive it. It's like imagine turning the dial on a chakra and it's just slowly turning it down the longer you stay in fight or flight. So for me, like I guess I did it both ways because I started working on the solar plexus chakra and it helped balance my ANS and get me out of fight or flight. But I also started working, with different techniques that would work with the parasympathetic nervous system to regulate the fight or flight to get me out of it, right? So, and that also balanced the solar plexus. So it was kind of like both aspects that I was doing because I was doing them hand in hand together. But I felt like once I started learning these different techniques of how to regulate the parasympathetic nervous system, it's like peeling back layers, but I was, releasing the trauma and working through stuff. And, sometimes it would be isolated incidences, like I said, that kidnapping, but sometimes, I've been in, flight for like decades, right? Maybe like 20 years. And so it wasn't just an isolated thing. And so the more I would work with the parasympathetic nervous system, it would release like years of trauma. So yeah, just finding out these techniques really helped change my life and really helped balance my solar plexus and release a lot of this fight or flight energy. That, we all can tap into fight or flight. It's just, we don't want to get stuck there. So if anybody is interested in learning about different techniques and different ways to deal with fight or flight, or how to work with your parasympathetic nervous system, or how to balance the solar plexus, or maybe it's a combination out of all of it, you can just drop healing in the chat. And I would love to continue a conversation with those that may be interested in regulating the ANS so they can operate more at a parasympathetic and, release these fight or flights and balance that solar plexus. I would love to continue these conversations. Like I said, we all have different situations that have brought us into fight or flight. And I know some are a little bit more personal. And so some people aren't as comfortable talking in the comments. So we can always email or private message or whatever works on the platform that you're in. But I would love to help anybody that is ready to start working through the fight or flight. And if there's any questions, you can drop it in the chat. But I just wanted to come on and kind of explain this because I don't know, like I said, maybe I'm just like a little science geek and like when things make sense and like, because here's the thing, like, let's say you're operating out of fight all the time and you're just angry. And then you get to the point you don't want to be angry, right? We all get to that point that we're like, oh, I realize I've got whatever it is. So in this situation, let's just say you realize you have rage and you're like, I don't like the person I've become. I don't want to be this way anymore. So for me, like the ego can get really lost in those negative emotions of like, one, we could lean more into anger, or it could be sadness and depression. And then we start beating yourself up, thinking something's wrong with us. And, these stories that we tell ourselves that we're just not lovable and not enough and not worthy. And so like when I started learning which body functions, I was like, oh, it's just my sympathetic nervous system that's activated. So how do I release the anger? Just activate the parasympathetic. Like it became so easy for me to process. And like, I stopped judging myself and stopped like beating myself up over, past issues and things that have happened. Cause I was like, well, I was operating out of states of fear. My body was, not to make excuses or ignore any of the stuff, but once that clicked for me, that I was just like, oh, it's just a simple fix. So let's now figure out how to work with the parasympathetic nervous system. And then that became a game changer. Instead of like feeling worse about myself, I started to feel better about myself. So all that like, oh, okay, well, it's just science. Our bodies do this and we can now get in charge and regulate it the other way. So it helped me a lot. Hopefully that makes sense to all of you guys and can kind of put these things in a different perspective. So we're not always, avoiding things at all costs, and we can just say, hey, I'm ready to deal with this. And it doesn't have to be as scary as we think, right? Because sometimes going into these traumas can be really scary to deal with old pains. But I like to encourage people with, well, it's a multi-layered healing, but like, finding these positive coping mechanisms and healthy ways to express yourself and deal with it. And like, what do you do in the moment when your body's in fight or flight? How do you prevent this from happening? And what can you do ahead of time if you start seeing the warning signs? And what do you do when you've fallen all the way down the rabbit hole and you really need to get out of fight or flight? Like, there's so many different layers of it, like how to work with the body. And so having all of these different skills and tools and techniques and practices and things that help me so much. Then some of it's like daily. I'm like, okay, well then my body just stays regulated and I don't have to worry about it. Right. So yeah, that's my little spiel on fight or flight, and how the body perceives it and what goes down on in the body when we're in fight or flight. So thank you guys for joining me. And again, if you guys would like to work on the parasympathetic nervous system, balancing your solar plexus chakra, or getting out of fight or flight, just drop the word healing in the comments and I will reach out to you and we can have a private discussion on how we can start achieving this. And until then, thank you guys so much for watching, and many blessings.